Good evening, Mr. Drozdovsky, and
Good evening, Remy.
thank you very much for joining us tonight. As I told you in the email, we're planning to give a short presentation of every journal we are trying to help with the CES program. And yeah, it would be very useful for us to get to know you and for our donors and partners, scientific committee, to know a bit more about your activity and your plans. So in the first time, could you please give us a short introduction of a short presentation of your work with the journal?
Well, Vsesvit magazine, Universe, All the World, is the oldest Ukrainian magazine that was grounded in 1925. In my hands now I have this big book, bibliography of our magazine since 1925 till 2000. So you see different indexes, you see different positions of texts, translations of poetry, novels, fiction, dramas, academic essays, scientific papers, articles, so on and so forth, that were published in our magazine. This is a huge amount of information, and for many years our magazine was a real window to the world culture and world literature in the Soviet time, and of course these days. Vsesvit magazine unites academic scholars from different universities, from departments of translation, mainly because we pay great attention to the history of Ukrainian translation. For example, in 60s, such people like Mykola Lukash, Grigory Kochur, Yevgen Popovich, so on and so forth, they were people who were working with different languages, cultures, translated texts into Ukrainian. And in fact, our magazine in the Soviet times, it was a unique window to the world of culture, despite all this ideology, all this pressure we had in Russian times. So I have been working for Vsesvit first as a editor of the Department of Criticism and Cultural Studies in 2006. So since 2012, I'm the managing editor-in-chief of this magazine. We cooperate with universities, we cooperate with universities abroad. For example, we had some international readings of Vsesvit in the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and we cooperated with Dr. Rory Finnin from the Department of Slavonic Studies. We pay special attention to what creates the fundamental essence of Ukrainian identity as a multicultural phenomenon, but with a great respect to the Ukrainian language, to Ukrainian history, to Ukrainian culture. Unfortunately, in this war, our magazine was considered, and in particular, I was considered by the enemies, the Russian enemies, as the enemy magazine, because, and I'm in the list of people who are not allowed to visit Russia, for example. Of course, I'm not going to visit Russia because we have a war with this country, with all these inadequate actions they do. But Vsesvit is a magazine that unites so many academics, scholars, experts in world culture, world theater. We provide reviews on plays, on performances we have in main Ukrainian theaters, for example, as Ivan Franko National Drama Theater in Kiev. Some international cultural projects. For example, last year in Ukraine was performed a play based on Friedrich Dürrenmatt. And we also wrote about this, a famous Swiss dramatist and writer. So we unite people. We had some, for example, I will demonstrate you the magazine of number 1, 2, previous year, what we had last year. Well, it's about 272 pages. about 300 pages each issue. We try to, when we had some special issues dedicated to other cultures, as we had two special Belgian issues, for example, dedicated to Belgian literature and especially to Belgian drama. We had a special Hebrew issue, for example, last year, dedicated to the contemporary Hebrew plays. We also try to inspire our cultural partners and agents to have an interest in Ukrainian culture, because for us, it's very important to establish this international cooperation. And of course, we work with academics, we translate their papers into Ukrainian about Shakespeare, Don Quixote, so on and so forth, the figures of the Western canon, if you remind of Harold Bloom, for example. So this is what Vsesvit is, a magazine of world culture in Ukrainian translations that has a specific history, wonderful manifestations, intensive cooperation, and a lot of people in Ukraine, they wait to get a new issue of our magazine. However, we need in a broken world now, and you know, a lot of people who were our subscribers, they left the country, so it's a very difficult question. And for some months, the printing houses, they stopped, because, for example, men who were involved in who worked in printing houses, they are in the army now, and women couldn't help with some machines in printing houses. That was a problem. So we need to print, for example, in the Zakarpattia. We were looking for some other options how to deal with this. But anyway, our magazine is a magazine of memory, a magazine of cultural memory, a magazine of cultural identity, Ukrainian identity based on principles of democracy, support, love. And we're trying to share this through texts, both literature and academic scholar research. That is also a very important section of our magazine.
Thank you very much for this presentation. You've already partially answered my next question, but I was meant to ask precisely how did the war impact your production and what are your urgent needs right now? You've been talking about the printing facilities, for example. Are there some other issues you're meeting?
Right, Remy. So the war affected the magazine because we couldn't work for some months. For example, our designer, our staff, they left Kyiv. It was very dangerous for some months. So they couldn't, for example, deal with the layout because we have a very special layout. They need their computers to work, to provide the design of our covers, for example, and the layout of the magazine. So we had to wait. Printing houses, they stopped their work because men are in the army, they joined the armed forces of Ukraine, and women couldn't deal with some equipment, some machines. They started their work, for example, printing some brochures, but this is not what can help us with our magazine. Of course, I understand that universities, libraries, they're closed now. We cannot enter them, and they cannot get magazines now and share this information. We try to weigh how we can share this online with our website, Vsesvit Journal.com, for example. A lot of people who had to leave their homes in Kyiv and who were living in the Kyiv region. So in many ways, this war affected us and had an impact on our way of how to distribute the magazine, because if we now print them in the Transcarpathian region or in Lutsk, the Volyn region, so the logistics becomes more expensive because we need to get the magazines from another regions. And you know, now we have also some the logistics is not so simple between regions. We have this war state and situation. We have operational hours when we are allowed to enter cities, and for example, the cars cannot drive from one region to another in the night time. So all this is a result of the war that impacted had an impact on our everyday magazine life.
Thank you very much. On the other hand, in this context, how can artists, intellectuals, and producers of intellectual contents, how can we help you from abroad?
Well, first, we really need this financial support from your donators, because this is important part how we can solve our everyday financial issues with publication, with printing, with providing support to our staff, for example, to people who now live in another country, in another cities and countries, in fact, and they were involved. Several months was spent how to organize their life. So if they had children, they had to help them to leave the country. For example, some children from our colleagues, they are now in Poland, in France, in Austria, in Vienna. So this also took time. And in this way, to survive, to provide this history of Ukrainian cultural, multicultural identity through Vsesvit, of course, the support of your organization is very important, as it gives us grounds of how to solve first of all, the financial issues, because if we had prices for paper on one level before the war, now we have crisis. We need to buy paper, for example, from other countries. So, and the price is much expensive, so on and so forth. This is why we addressed your organization with the true hope that you can be our partner, and we together can create a product that has a very powerful history and is a part of memory, as history, as culture, as traditions, and as a form of resistance, because we also addressed with our partners from the Ukrainian Institute, Book Institute, in the campaign of boycott of Russian products, because you know the Russian cultural products, the taxes from abroad, they go to Russia and they can be used, and they are used for weapons. And in this way, we have this very tight connection between culture and ideology and military issues and weapons that kill people. What happened in Mariupol, what happened, I was a member of military group and we visited Bucha, we visited Irpin. This is a Bucha massacre, for example, what we had. And in this way, our magazine, we had a very big discussion on Facebook regarding this, and Russian scholars, so they stated that Vsesvit is the enemy magazine now. War à la guerre comme à la guerre. This is war. We support Ukraine, we support freedom, we support solidarity, we support the idea of territorial integrity of Ukraine and the occupation of what we have now in the south, the hell we have in Severodonetsk, the hell we have in other eastern countries close to the Kharkiv region, is what should be stopped, because we have subscribers there, we have our friends there, we have our colleagues, our authors, who prepared translations, who wrote academic papers from Karazin University, from Odessa Mechnikov University, from Mykolaiv also. This is again return to your question of how the war impacted our everyday life and life, of course, of our colleagues. We have the editorial board of people whose lives were impacted by this war.
Thank you for your answer. We are indeed trying to bring some help, and it's on its way. My last question is about the future. What are your magazine's prospects and plans for the years to come, if you are granted, when you will be granted the help from our program?
Well, first we need to work to function. So we need to provide and establish a system that So in 2 months, we need to prepare a new issue, and we need this ground to be sure that our subscribers, our people will receive this information. Of course, we want to, our magazines will be dedicated to the issues of war. So we want to unite intellectuals from abroad, our partners, provide some thematic sections in our magazine about war, what happened in Ukraine, how it was reflected in the UK, in other European countries, in the United States, and our partners who helped and who help Ukraine a lot each single day. In fact, you know, in 2014, when we had the revolution of dignity, and that was the first step in this war we have now with Russia. The first issue we prepared after the war, after the revolution, was the issue dedicated to Poland, because Poland for that time was a kind of advocate of Ukraine in the world. And now I wish that we could prepare an issue dedicated to the cultures, to literatures of all the countries who are now very close friends of Ukraine, because Ukraine couldn't survive without Poland, without the United Kingdom, without European countries, of course, France, the United States of America, Japan, so on in the global context. Of course, the Republic of Korea in Seoul, they helped Ukraine financially with medicine, Israel, right? So my idea is to prepare an issue that in the end of the war, when we have the end of this catastrophe, dedicated to all our European and maybe world partners, a post-war period. And of course, in each issue, we are going to have reflections by our world colleagues about the war we have. I think it's important to continue this course, this line of solidarity, because now we feel with this solidarity, and Ukraine is a point that if it is destroyed, the next stop is Europe with this war with Russia. We, you know, we struggle for being with Europe, for sharing European values. And of course, we want to stop this bloody hell, using this Shakespeare's expression that we have in Ukraine right now. And we want to create such issues every 2 months. For example, you see I have these wonderful covers, different magazines that now it's live due to these problems we have, but in the future I think we might have the new international board, for example, inviting people, intellectuals, writers who supported Ukraine. For example, in the UK, Ian McEwan supported Ukraine. Stephen King, whom we published in Ukrainian translation, supported Ukraine. This is a perspective for future, for cooperation with the world.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was, we can see you're very passionate, and we are hoping to be of some kind of help. We will be keeping in touch anyways, and we wish you well in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Remy. Thank you to all your colleagues, because I've been in contact with Pierre. So he's also a very kind, very bright person with a deep heart, understanding what happens in this world. And war is something beyond our reason, our wit, our normal, ordinary life, based on the principle of happiness, of joy, this pursuit of happiness, right, as it's mentioned in the Constitution of the United States of America. So the life stopped because, you know, for example, when we hear sirens right now in Kiev, we cannot work. So we need to go to some bunkers, we need to find a way out still. So every day, in fact, we live in this crazy, crazy world, but all together. And this is a principle of the European Union, right? This principle of solidarity, this basic principle, is very important to live and to share in Ukraine values of Europe, explaining that Ukrainian cultural identity is based on so many traces, on so many levels of European identity that was with us perhaps for this at least 100 years. So in 2 years we are going to celebrate 100 years of Vsesvit magazine. 100 years, it's something beyond my understanding how the magazine could live for so many decades, for so many years. And I hope together with you, you will be with us at this celebration in the end of the war. I hope that you will be our friends invited to this event, maybe with Skype or with the Zoom, or you will visit Ukraine finally. You know, now it's quite dangerous, but in future, after the war, I hope we'll have a peaceful, intellectual and cultural life based on principle of unity in diversity.